Hey guys, welcome or welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button as it helps the channel. And let's go ahead and get into it. Chapter 13. By now, our income was next to nothing. The cows dropped way down in their milk production. Some were even dry, expecting their calves. Feed was scarce. It would be 3 long months before the rainy season, when there would again be plenty of tall grass. Anna was expecting a baby a week after me. She promised Florin she was leaving him as soon as her baby was born. This was no life for her, she said. She wanted to live a little, not always struggling just to survive. I could understand completely. The LeBaron's primitive existence was killing me too. I envied her spunk. Verlin talked for several months of the possibility of our moving back to the States, perhaps to Salt Lake City, to be part of Uncle Rulon's group again. He knew we needed a better social and material life, but he was wary about leaving. His late father, Almer Dayer LeBaron Sr., had expressly warned all his sons to stay in Mexico to raise their families. They're sitting here listening to this person who has them, I guess, struggling to survive, living off of a land that at this point isn't even producing enough grass for milk, for the cows to produce milk, and you want to sit here and say that they're supposed to continue to suffer while mice and stuff crawls up the door frames and all these other things, when there were other options. They were just trying to escape being caught. He believed that his sons would someday participate in a great work that would take place there. One of them, in fact, was going to be called into a secret priesthood as a direct spiritual descendant of Joseph Smith himself. In the meantime, we were nearly destitute. We need to pray that God will intervene, Verlin humbly whispered to Charlotte and me one night. Ask him to either save our financial situation or show us where we ought to go. So we knelt in a little circle, holding hands. Each took a turn pleading with the Lord to guide us. Then we went to bed, hoping for the best. As usual, Verlin was up before daylight. He hitched the horse to an old plow and dragged it to a field he planned to plow all day. He usually came home at noon to eat, but it got to be 1:30 and we still hadn't seen a sign of him. I took a spoon and our last bottle of cherries out to the field so he could have something for lunch. I knew he was discouraged and I wanted to cheer him up. I hoped to surprise him. I found his horse tied to a barbed wire fence, the plow lying on its side. Only 8 rows had been worked. What is going on? Only 8 rows had been worked. I knew this wasn't right. I called his name several times but got no answer. Maybe he'd been bitten by a rattler and died. I started crying as I looked for him among the mesquites. Eventually, I went home to wait, and I got Charlotte upset too. About 9 p.m., Verlin came in with Florin and Anna close behind him. I had to get us all together to tell you the wonderful news, he blurted out. Oh, Lord, let's see what's going to happen. He was so excited. I didn't have the heart to scold him, especially if God might be behind the day's events. We pulled the wooden chairs around the table, sat down, and braced ourselves for the good news. Verlin was smiling so happily. I knew whatever he had to tell us must be really good. God has answered our prayers, he began. Oh, goodness. I prayed most of the night for God to bless us, to open up a way for us to stay in Mexico if it was his will. Then, this morning, I just started plowing when a pickup stopped on the road. An American got out and came over to where I was plowing. He introduced himself as Dick Loomis. Asked me if I knew how to make cheese. Boy, do I ever, I said. He took me to a ranch called Terrenates. I'm not going to try to butcher that. About 60 miles from here, near the town of Flores Magon. He wants me to start working for him immediately. We're going to be buying cows, shipping them in from the States. We'll set up a factory that makes the best cheese in Chihuahua. And that's not all. We'll have an 11-room house for our family with electricity. Oh, yeah. Now, I'm not gonna lie. If I was praying the night before for something and then the next day I got that, I too would have jumped down and been like, oh, thank you. Just being honest. um, Imagine that. And hot running water is furnished too. They have a vegetable garden. We can have all the vegetables we want out of it. I was told they would kill a steer once a month so we can get free meat. Okay, so here's my question. Does he know that you're a polygamist? Or is this a thing where he's inviting this to you thinking that that's your sister and your sister-in-law and your kid, and she has another kid with somebody else? Let's see. I was told they would kill a steer once a month so we could get free meat. Besides that, we'll have all the milk, cheese, and eggs we need. Plus, now listen to this, he beamed. I'll get paid $2 a day. $2 a day. I got to remember the time period, I guess, and the fact that they were in Mexico, but $2 a day? That sounds ridiculous. I don't know. We can't do anything with that now. Flushed with excitement, his eyes sparkled. Flora and I can both live in the house with our families. We can live high on the hog, with Joel and his wife in the mountains and Alma and Ervil here at the LeBaron Ranch. We can all live better lives. We knelt in prayer, thanking God for his goodness and for our deliverance. Later, when we were in bed, I let Verlin know I was somewhat disappointed. I was hoping we could all go back to the States. But of course, this is the next best. You'll even have to sacrifice a little more, Irene. I really hate to ask it of you, but for now, you'll have to move up to Spencerville into my Aunt Annie's 2-room house. So, did I call it or did I call it? She can't go with them. So he's sitting here saying to her, thanks for, we did it. We got this prayer answered, whatever. Our families could come. But she's not a part of that number because more than likely his first wife is going to get the benefits of the electricity. Meanwhile, she's going from one bad situation to another. This is ridiculous. It'll just be till the baby comes. I'll be going to the States for cows and equipment. In fact, I'll be leaving tomorrow to start my new job. But what about the baby, Verlin? Won't you be here for the baby? I implored. Be patient. God will look after you. I can't pass up this opportunity. Besides, Charlotte will be with you if I can't make it back in time. You've got to learn to have greater faith and trust in God. Then he gently kissed me goodnight and rolled over, and his loud snoring soon drowned out my sniffling. So you're pregnant, and I'm going to use that as an excuse as to why you can't enjoy the electricity when you would think that you would want your pregnant wife to be more comfortable, but I guess that's not a thing. This calendar on the wall said it was August 6th. My due date was the 12th, but I was more than ready to get this thing over with. Swollen all over, I felt huge and unattractive. I hated my 2 faded maternity outfits. I couldn't wait to cut them into small pieces and turn them into toilet paper. I'd been sick ever since I got home from my checkup. My head throbbed all the time. I even passed out once. That sounds like high blood pressure to me. Everyone told me it was just nerves. Ervil actually accused me of being a coward. Isn't it so interesting how a man can tell a woman how her body's responding to pregnancy, yet he's never been pregnant? Who's the real coward, Ervil? I guess I was. I decided I needed a doctor at my first delivery, even if the doctor was a man. After all, I've been feeling that something was wrong ever since the day I made the strange statement to Verlin. So I begged Verlin to let me have our baby in the hospital. As always, he tried to allay my fears to the point of flat discounting them. To allay my fears to the point of flat discounting them. Having a baby is the most natural thing in the world. In fact, he laughed, every mother on earth has gone through it, and every mother on earth has a different experience. How about that? That was when Ervil shared his thoughts on the subject. Delphina has had her 3 girls at home. It's as easy as a cow having a calf. I thought it interesting that all these reprimands were coming from men. Exactly. I cried alone every night, or so it seemed. I didn't want to be a chicken, but I was homesick for Utah. I felt I needed my mother, but my biggest concern was having the baby without Verlin there. He'd left 2 weeks earlier for the Terrenates Tarantes. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Ranch after moving Charlotte, her babies, and me over to Spencerville. Oh, so the babies and all of them had to go too. It wasn't just her. I take it back. He got to enjoy certain things, but they couldn't. You'll be in good hands, he told me. Aunt Sylvia, the midwife, also Lucy's mother, lived only a mile down the road from the 2-room hut we borrowed from Aunt Annie. Charlotte sweetly offered to stay with me to see that the delivery went well. What more could I ask? I still felt jittery. My legs and feet were so swollen I could hardly walk. I imagined complications. What if something went wrong? Although I kept my word and never mentioned my earlier premonition again to anyone, I worried about it constantly and begged God to let it be false. I wanted a live, healthy baby, especially because they probably blame her if it don't go right. I drank lots of herb teas at Aunt Sylvia's insistence. She thought it might reduce the swelling in my hands and feet. I tried to cheer myself up by thinking how my grandmother bore some of her children in Mexico with only a midwife attending her. I wanted to be like her. I came from good pioneer stock. Would I be less than she was? I prayed constantly, placing myself squarely in God's hands. I just finished washing the breakfast dishes when terrible diarrhea pains hit me again. Y'all remember the last time we were in this diarrhea pains, but let's see what happens. I ran to the old outhouse and quickly sat. These are the pictures. There's a bunch of pictures here. But I don't want to give away anything, so I'll show some stuff at the end of the chapter. How about that? Just in case they give us anything. Gracious, it's a bunch of here. Okay. I quickly sat down, but the pain kept up. So finally, I waddled back to the house. I looked at Aunt Anne's clock. It was noon. Aunt Annie's clock. It was noon. Charlotte saw me crying as I sprawled onto the bed. Are you in labor? She asked. I answered by rocking back and forth, rubbing my stomach and thighs. It was one continuous pain. Aunt Sylvia came immediately. From that point on, I remember very little except that I lay there for hours feeling like I was dying. Charlotte's mother, my Aunt Rhea, arrived from the States just minutes after my laboring pains began. Marden, one of the Spencer boys, brought her down from Utah for a visit. After he dropped her off, he left immediately for the ranch to get Verlin. It had rained for days, and the muddy roads were washed out in several places. I knew it could be hours before he came. At 4 p.m., Alma bought a Dr. Ramirez from nearby El Valle. Sorry, y'all, my allergies just hit me. Dr. Hatch lived a couple hours away near Casas. This doctor was really rough with me. I thought I'd split as he plunged his fingers inside me. She'll go 8 or 10 more hours yet. Send for me again if you need me, he said and left. What he clearly meant was, handle it, what are you calling me for? The clock nearly stopped after that. Every 10 minutes seemed like an eternity as I drifted in and out of consciousness. 10 o'clock eventually came and went. I expected Verlin hours before, even with the washed out roads to deal with. I strained to listen for the bouncing trucks in the rain, wondering if each one could be Verlin coming to help me through this. Deliriously, I called his name over and over. Aunt Sylvia grew concerned about my groggy, semi-conscious condition. She asked Charlotte why I didn't work with them, trying to rally me. Aunt Rhea rubbed my legs vigorously and massaged my hands. Charlotte held my head as Aunt Sylvia tried to force some coffee down me in hopes it would revive me, but I refused to drink it. I'd been taught that coffee was a no-no. All I wanted was for them to leave me alone and for Verlin to come. Before I merely needed him. Now I was desperate for him. As I drifted in and out, I could hear the woman's muffled voices. Irene, it's coming. The head's appearing. You've got to cooperate with us, Sylvia demanded. Charlotte coached me. Push. Keep it up. Come on now. That's a good girl. My mouth was parched. Charlotte gave me sips of water. The bearing down pains brought me out of my stupor as I cried out with each one. They prodded me. Push, Irene. Push. Just a few more times and we'll have it. Help me. Help me, I cried as the baby's head crowned. With Charlotte on one side of me and Aunt Rhea on the other, I grabbed their hands in trembling fear and pushed with all my strength. Pants, Irene, pants, Charlotte ordered. I did, but I felt like hot acid had been sprayed in spite of me. With one more push and a blood-curdling scream, the baby's head came out. Push one more time to get the baby's shoulders out, Aunt Rhea commanded me. The hardest part is almost over. Hanging on to their hands, I pushed again and felt one huge release as the baby flopped into Aunt Sylvia's hands. It's a girl, Charlotte exclaimed. A darling baby girl. She kissed my forehead, wiping it again with cool, wet cloth. I glanced at the clock. It was 10 minutes past midnight. Interesting how, despite their tough moments and them not talking to each other and all the other stuff that goes on, that when it's time for them to give birth, that they seem to rally around each other. Because here her sister is, who's also her sister wife, and she's being there for her in that moment. I'd endured 12 hours of sheer hell. Then I noticed the silence. Why isn't she crying? I yelled frantically. Pulling up on my elbows, I watched Aunt Sylvia squeeze a rubber syringe, drawing the phlegm from the baby's nostrils. Please don't let this be one of those chapters, goodness gracious. Please, I begged God, let her cry. Then Sylvia spanked her little bottom, and my precious baby let out her first cry. Y'all. I could see her still attached to my body by the thick, wrinkled umbilical cord that had nourished her for 9 months. She cried like her little heart was broken. Give her to me, please, I begged. Aunt Sylvia said, calm down. She's okay. Let's cut the cord first. When we get her cleaned up, then you can take her. No, now, I insisted. I silently feared that God was going to snatch her away from me. Just to calm me down, Aunt Sylvia gave in. She placed the darling treasure on my stomach. I held her by her little arms, listening to her whimpers. Then as I let go of her arms to turn her on her side, she grabbed my index finger. I wondered how any woman could ever abort such priceless, adorable gifts from God. You're Mommy's precious little angel, I cooed. I'll call her Leah, I announced. Satisfied that God had heard my months of anguished pleas, I relaxed, handed her back to Aunt Sylvia so she could cut the cord. When she was through, Aunt Sylvia wrapped my baby in a towel and handed her to Charlotte. You get the privilege of doing the rest, she said. Charlotte took her and said, Irene, she's beautiful. She proceeded to clean her rosy body with cotton dipped in warm olive oil. When I made it clear to Charlotte that I didn't want this tiny baby out of my sight, she assured me I could have her back as soon as she finished with her. When Charlotte tended Leah, Aunt Sylvia finished with me. Push again. This is just the afterbirth. It won't hurt. Aunt Sylvia informed me. I reluctantly pushed, expelling it. I watched fascinated as Aunt Sylvia examined the placenta inside and out and looking for any torn or missing pieces. It's okay. Now we can clean up this messy bed. I was looking at my flat tummy thanking God it was all over when suddenly Charlotte cried out for help. Oh no. Why is it in every one of these books some tragedy happens with the baby? Goodness gracious, y'all. Handing the baby to Aunt Sylvia, she explained, "This baby keeps acting like she's passing out." Aunt Sylvia cleaned out Leah's nostrils and mouth again with a syringe, then holding up her back with one hand and her tiny heels with the other, Aunt Sylvia forced the baby's little knees back and forth onto her chest. She slapped her bottom several times with no response. "God," I cried, "don't do this to me. Please, God, don't do it." But I just knew he wasn't listening. I heard Charlotte's sobs first, then Aunt Rhea's. Aunt Sylvia told me what I already knew. She's gone, Irene. Woo! Yes, she's gone. I was too paralyzed to cry. I just lay there in shock, numbly watching Aunt Sylvia clean up the bed, rolling me from side to side to put a clean sheet under me. Then I watched Charlotte dress my dead baby in a long sleeve undershirt as though to keep her warm. Over that, she put on a tiny white satin dress that I made from scraps. It had delicate pink roses embroidered on the yoke. Charlotte scanned the room for a place to lay her out. She covered the wooden lid of the toy box with a receiving blanket, placing Leah's tiny, lifeless body on it. "What else do I do?" she asked Aunt Sylvia helplessly. "Watch me. I'll teach you how to lay someone out," she whispered as she tore two narrow strips from one of the new flannel diapers, placing one under the baby's chin. She pulled her little mouth closed, tying a bow on top of her head. Then she crossed Leah's little hands on her chest, saying, "Hold these in place while I tie them." She searched in her purse for 2 small coins. "Look, Charlotte, her eyelids are half open. Push them closed like this. Now place a coin on each eyelid." Y'all are doing all of this and she hasn't even got a chance to hold her baby again? When rigor mortis sets in, you can remove them and her eyes will stay closed. At the same time, take the cords from her hands and her head. Her mouth will stay shut and her hands will stay in place on her chest. I watched in disbelief. I could barely endure life. I was in no shape at all to deal with death. It just couldn't be happening to me. I lay there in silence as emotional numbness took over me. I later heard a pickup coming closer through the drizzly night. It had to be Verlin. Charlotte stepped outside into the dark to meet him. I could hear the excitement in his voice. "Was it a girl?" he asked. Then there was silence, followed by rapid footsteps that seemed to batter my poor heart all the way to the door. He stepped inside quietly. I could see his intense grief through the dim lamp light. He knelt beside my bed and gathered me in his arms. Seeing my expressionless face, he remembered my premonition. "How did you know?" "I just knew," I answered. "I just knew." He buried his head in my chest, sobbing like a child. Why wasn't I here? I missed her by 20 minutes. "Irene, you're too young for this," he cried. Getting up from his kneeling position, he walked over to the toy box, glancing at our little Leah. I watched his tears fall as he immediately returned to lie down beside me on the bed in his damp clothes. He held me as though he feared I'd be snatched away too. I couldn't say anything. I could only lie there, still as a corpse, by myself. Verlin wept the tears I could not. I watched his anguished body heaving, convulsing with deep sobs, until he finally fell asleep. A few minutes later, he awoke and stumbled back over to the toy box to examine our baby more closely. He stroked her silky brown hair, touched each delicate finger. He shook his head, sighing deeply as he noticed that her fingernails were already turning black. Then he returned to my bed, caressing me and crying softly until slumber again relieved his grief. I watched his rhythmic breathing as the empty lamp flickered a time or two and then went out, as did the light in my heart. When a rooster crowed the next morning, Verlin awoke to our harsh reality. It was 6 a.m., and he had much to do to prepare for the funeral. Borrowing a pick and a shovel, he hired 2 Mexicans to go and dig a grave. We didn't have a vehicle of our own, so he took the workers and the Spencer's pickup. He stopped along the way at the Presidencia to notify the authorities of our baby's birth and death. He'd already sent a 12-year-old Mexican neighbor off on horseback to take a note to Joel, 5 miles away to the LeBaron Ranch. On receiving the heart-trending news, Joel notified the other family members. He then gathered up some tools and nails, saddled up his horse, and left for Spencerville. It was about 10 a.m. by the time he arrived at our hut. From my bed, I numbly watched Joel through the screen door as he selected the best piece from a pile of warped, wet boards for the coffin. He measured the unplanned pine. Then, with a dull handsaw, he cut each board to the proper size. Can you imagine the amount of anguish that she's going through in this moment? And as she's sitting there going through this, she's watching as this man is preparing the coffin for her baby that she carried for all those months, that she endured labor for, to have her no longer here. I hate this. I hate that people take life so for granted, and I hate that people like Ervil just act like labor is just this normal, everyday thing when it's not. A woman's body goes through so much during that period, and I guess it's because birth is such a common thing that we forget that this happens. Whew. I can't remember if I read this. Each nail drove, and I envisioned being pounded deep into my own throbbing heart. After Joel had made the lid, he hammered nails into each corner, but he inserted them only halfway through the wood, so that later, when her body was inside, the lid could be nailed down tight. He carried the rough little box into the kitchen, where Aunt Sylvia helped Charlotte pleat my white flannel diapers and tack them into place to form a lining that would cover the knotted boards and protect her from pine splinters. When he got back to the hut, Verlin picked up our little Leah and placed her in my arms for the last time. I looked at her precious, ashen face. I didn't blink. Couldn't blink. I stared hard and long at my baby. The years would hopefully lessen the pain, but her beautiful features would always be there, etched in my mind. After my final look, Verlin picked her up and gently put her in the rustic casket. It was past noon. He knew he had to get going. The Spencer's truck pulled up. Delphina, Anna, Florin, Ervil, and all 14 of the Spencers came into my room. They huddled together, 10 of the children sitting on the foot and sides of my bed. No one knew what to say, but the adults moved single file past Leah's casket. Joel offered a prayer. Then Florin and Verlin guided the lid into place on the casket, and Joel pounded the nails on through, making sure the lid was down tight. They are not wasting any time. Verlin motioned for Florin and Ervil to carry the casket outside to the truck. Single file, the rest of our family and friends followed them. Charlotte and Aunt Rhea were waiting in the cab of the truck, purposely leaving me alone with Verlin. He took a blue receiving blanket from the dresser. I'm taking this with me. I want to cover the casket with it. He kissed me several times, not wanting to leave. We were interrupted by Karen, an 11-year-old sister of mine and Charlotte, who arrived with Aunt Rhea the day before. I'm going to stay with you while everyone goes to the funeral. Verlin left with the blanket, but he'd hardly shut the door behind him when he whirled around and came back to me crying. He held both of my hands in his. I'll make it up to you, Irene, I promise. I could only look at him with no emotion. It was dark when Verlin walked in with a small cardboard box he placed on my bed. How's my sweetheart doing? He asked, kissing my cheek. You can't believe how God works things out. I waited for the story he was clearly dying to tell me. I'm sorry we're back so late, he said. When we got to the graveyard, the men didn't have the hole deep enough, so it took us a while to get it to the required depth. I jumped into the grave and Joel and Florin lowered the casket down to me. Charlotte handed me the little blanket and I spread it over the box. For some reason, I didn't want her to be cold, he sighed. Then Joel and Ervil pulled me out. Flying gravel hit the wooden casket with loud thuds, but soon it was all covered. When the grave was completely filled, my brother stomped the dirt down firmly. He paused. Please don't feel bad, Irene. I just want you to know I did the best I could. We made a nice little mound on top with the remaining dirt. I measured from both cemetery walls so we won't lose her grave before I can afford a sack of cement to make a good marker for it. Be sure to help me remember that it's 3 long steps from the north wall and 7 steps from the east wall. He stopped to see if I was taking it okay. All I could do was lie there and stare up at him. I promise, Irene, I'll make her a headstone. Now let's get happy, get our minds on other things. I've got a surprise for you. Hold on a second. This all just happened. And whether she knew or thought or whatever it was going to happen, this is a tragic event. And just like that, he wants her to get her mind off of it. And I get he's probably trying to be there for her and make her not sit in it. But that's kind of easier said than done. Ooh. God touched Juan Fernandez's heart for us. I had everyone stay in the truck while I went into his store. I was embarrassed because he cut off our credit last month after I charged oil, cotton, and the flanner for diapers. I told him I knew we owed him $40, but I'd pay him interest if he'd just give in this once and extended our credit. I told him about our baby's death and that I needed to get something for you. He couldn't have been nicer. In fact, he sent you his condolences. Verlin patted my hand and continued. I hid the box under Charlotte's feet in the front of the pickup. I didn't want Delphina and the others to see what I bought. I don't need to be criticized for buying luxuries. Charlotte entered my room and sat on the foot of my bed. Are you really ready for this? Verlin asked excitedly. I tried to appreciate his efforts, but I really didn't care about anything. I doubted I'd smile again. When I didn't answer, he urged me, please cheer up, Irene. Then he reached into the box with both his big hands and brought out 6 bottles of Coke. Y'all, I wasn't expecting that. I'm going to leave it alone and say he's trying. But what? These are all yours, he said. Then he scattered 8 American candy bars across the bed. He had the biggest grin on his face, just waiting for my reaction. I picked up a Baby Ruth and a Butterfinger, rubbing my fingers over them in disbelief. It was illegal to sell such American products here. These items had been smuggled in. You actually bought this contraband? Yeah, he said, nodding his head, hoping for approval. I did it just for you, and that's not all. There's something else. He handed me a shoebox. Did I dare open it? Was this box some sort of deception? Camouflage for something else? Too excited to wait for me, Verlin took the lid off, pulling out a pair of beautiful black patent leather shoes. Neither had a gift been more appropriate or more meaningful. My numbness vanished. The pain I'd been clinging to dissolved, and my tears gushed freely. God may have forgotten me, but Verlin hadn't. Okay, I guess it did what it needed to do. That at least she's not, just laying there. I said there was pictures. Pull Polygamist exposed in Time magazine in 1944. My father, Morris Q, was one of the fundamentalists who was sentenced for being polygamous. He served over 2 years in the Utah State Prison. And then below is a picture of her at age 15 in 1952. Okay, so I guess one of those circled things is her father. But look at her. She's pretty. She was pretty. I mean, above left, Verlin is age 18. Above right, this was considered our wedding picture taken 3 years after our marriage. Below is her pregnant with her daughter in 1955. So this is the handsome Verlin we keep hearing about. He all right. She's pretty. Pretty. Okay, above it's going to be her and Verlin in November 1954, and then the headstone for Leah, born on August 7th, 1954, died August 7th, 1954, beloved daughter and sister. So that's her and him. And then the headstone that I guess he had made. Then above is going to be her, Charlotte, and him. And we'll get to the other pictures, I guess, as we get into it. Because as I said, I don't want to give anything away. All right. Let me see. I feel like that's not enough reading. We need to read another chapter. So let me get back into this. Okay. Y'all excuse me. All that crying. All that crying got my nose feeling like, ooh, I'm going to have to put a little warning thing in there because that's some tough stuff. Okay. Chapter 14. How long is this? Yeah, I can do it. Chapter 14. 3 months after Leah's death, I got to go home to Utah to visit my family. Seeing the gorgeous snow-capped Ouachita, I know I'm saying that wrong, Wasatch mountains again helped to heal me just a little from my long ordeal in Mexico. Seeing my mother helped me even more. She wept as she lamented how much I've been through over the past year. And the fact that she had not been there to help me through my baby's birth and death. I didn't have the heart to tell her about the rest of my sufferings. In part, I still felt so foolish about charging off and marrying Verlin despite all my family's well-founded warnings that I would terribly, terribly regret doing so. Over the first 2 weeks of my visit, I gained several pounds. Alarmed, Mother complained about my constant eating. I knew I couldn't tell her why. Yeah, she was eating like that because she had been starving. How would she believe that I had gone for over a year without tasting peanut butter jam, margarine, Jell-O, tuna, mayonnaise, or so many of the other things I used to take for granted? At my mother's house, I couldn't help gorging luxuriously on raisins, nuts, fresh fruits, and ice cream. I was afraid I might not ever see such scrumptious goodies again. The result was fairly disastrous. One night, I woke up with my side killing me. The pain shot clear down to my knees. I couldn't wait until morning to see a doctor, so Mother rushed me in the dead of the night to see Uncle Rulon, who my family went to for medical as well as spiritual emergencies. Her body's so unaccustomed to getting that stuff that she's having a reaction. Okay, let's see what happens. It's your appendix. What? Uncle Rulon concluded. It's about to burst. You need an operation immediately. I'll find you a surgeon. I told him I couldn't be operated on because I had no money to pay an American hospital bill. Besides, I was now Verlin's responsibility. I had Leah without Verlin there, and that was hard enough. I meant for him to be with me through all other medical crises I might have to endure. I left Uncle Rulon's office against his strong advice and made plans to return to Mexico. Girl, don't play with that. But the prospect of cutting short my vacation devastated me. I longed for more time with my family. Even more fervently, I longed to escape life in Mexico. Circumstances there were just too unbearable. Now faced with having to run right back to those circumstances, I found myself entertaining unthinkable things. The pain in my side didn't help. A divorce could settle everything. Then I could start a new life back here in Utah. I could eat what I wanted, wear normal 20th century clothes, and maybe even hook up with Glenn again. Almost as soon as the vision formed, I felt ashamed. Oh, goodness. For thinking of such a thing, for thinking about such a wicked plan. How I wish I had someone wise and objective I could go to for counsel. Maybe if I prayed harder. I felt better about going back. I rationalized that Verlin was honest, upright, good looking, and he loved the Lord. After all, I just wish I could believe he really loved me. I remembered a lecture of faith I once heard. Any religion that doesn't require the sacrifice of all things earthly doesn't have the power to lay hold of things eternal, the lecturer assured us. I'd given up everything material. Was I now willing to sacrifice my feelings also? I wanted a celestial glory, didn't I? Then I shouldn't complain. Of course, I had to return. The Cox family from Cambeds, Arizona, offered to take me with them to Mexico. I rode the 1,000-mile trip in the back of a 3/4-ton pickup with only canvas over top of it. With 9 people aboard, it was almost impossible to relax on the mattress. And with an appendix that's about to bust, I'm sure. The chill of the November night, plus the pain in my stomach, kept me awake and worried that my appendix would rupture any minute from all the endless jolting. Once we got to the Mexican border, we went from highways to dusty, ungraded dirt roads for the final 200 miles to the LeBaron Ranch. On my arrival, Verlin, Charlotte, and I left immediately for Casas to find a doctor to perform the operation. When we arrived there late in the evening, we were told that Dr. Hatch had gone deer hunting. Dr. Sauls and Fragoso would have to do the operation the following morning. I was admitted to the clinic on Thanksgiving Day. Almost immediately, Charlotte and Verlin took off with a friend, Osmond Jones, to eat Thanksgiving turkey. Y'all, she should have just stayed where she was. This is crazy. I couldn't believe he'd leave me among strangers at a time like this. Exactly. It seemed I could never be alone with my husband when I really needed to be. Charlotte was present at my wedding to place my hand in his. Worse, she'd been around after my baby died, so Verlin and I couldn't even mourn in private. Now, when I desperately needed Verlin to reassure and comfort me, he was off again with her. I never had an operation, never even been in a hospital. It seemed to me my life was in danger, and on top of that, I felt abandoned and alone. I was 17 and petrified. 17 years old, and she experienced the death of her baby. In lieu of my missing husband, I wanted my mother. To prep me for surgery, the nurse painted my stomach and my legs down to my knees with disinfectant. Then Arturo Manunos, the young Mexican English-speaking anesthesiast, arrived on the scene. He didn't look a day over 20. He put a rubber band around my left arm and thumbed my vein with his finger until it bulged out enough to insert a needle. He shot some fluid in and asked, "Do you feel sleepy?" Before I could say a word, I was out cold. I thought I could hear voices. I listened again. Yes, Verlin was talking to me. "Irene, Dr. Hatch is here to see you." The light was too bright, almost blinding. I squinted until I could focus on the doctor, but he looked odd to me. At first, I thought I might be imagining the scratches and cuts all over his head and face. His eyes were swollen and bruised. "Oh, Dr. Hatch," I said, still drugged all up. What happened to you?" He patted my arm reassuringly. I went hunting, and my horse fell off a cliff with me still on him. I gasped. I grasped his arm, trying unsuccessfully to sit up. With a concerned, pathetic look, and to Verlin's great embarrassment, I said, "Oh, the poor horse." Because let's be real, they matter too. I carried Leah for 9 months, and throughout that time, Verlin and I kept the law of purity. He hadn't made love to me once during my pregnancy, nor had he done so afterward while we were grieving. Counting the 3+ months since Leah's death, it had now been a full year since I had sexual intimacy. A part of me was dying in that sense, especially. I felt Verlin was still more a stranger to me than a husband. My incision from the appendectomy healed slowly, but my fights with Verlin were hot and constant. When he'd come to bed, we'd always argue about sex. You've read too many steamy novels, he'd lecture me. Besides, you've been too sick. I don't know if you're over the toxemia, a condition in which one's blood carries a dangerous level of toxins, was what they decided had gone wrong with Leah's birth. You may get it again if you get pregnant. The doctor said for you to wait at least a year. You know we can't practice birth control. That's a sin, second only to murder, so we'll just have to abstain. So she has to abstain for a year because of that. Please be patient, Irene. I wish you believe I love you. I felt such a loss without my baby. I longed to hold another child in my arms. At the same time, I needed a little physical love before I conceive again. I pray God would understand. One January night, in complete despair, I demanded that Verlin make love to me. Girl, I think you bring suffering upon yourself, Irene, he retorted. You have too much sex on your mind. You must overcome it or you'll never be happy. Please, Verlin, please, I begged. Well, let's pray about it first, he said. So we got down on our knees and held hands by the side of the bed, while Verlin prayed yet again about having intercourse with me. If it requires all that, I don't want it. I'm sorry. We're married. We're going to have sex as much as we want to. We're married. And here he is telling her no. I wondered if God really wanted to hear such prayers. Since he'd given us our free agency, why do we have to get his permission for every little move we made? Besides, if God by chance gave us the okay to proceed, I didn't want to have to think about him peeking in on us again. We got back into bed and I waited some more. I wondered if perhaps God spoke, but Verlin just never heard. Impatient, I finally asked, well, are we going to do it? No, I have to wait until I feel good about it. Irene, I get you're young, honey, but you keep begging for it, it's getting on my nerves. He's not going to do it until he wants to do it. And he has another wife that he could do it with. I'm just saying. Okay, no, I have to wait until I feel good about it, he said matter-of-factly and turned over to go to sleep. Hours later, I awoke to Verlin's advances. He whispered, Irene, I dreamed we had a beautiful dark-haired baby. Now I feel good about this. Jesus. I was perplexed. Why were Verlin's dreams from God, but mine were not? I dreamt hundreds of times that we were making love, and Verlin had never once thought those dreams were inspired. Still, I was overjoyed about his change of heart. Like I said, it's going to be when he wants to do it. We knew nothing about ovulation. My periods were supremely reliable. I had one every 26 days. After the night Verlin and I had his glorious dream and we finally made love again, my very next period went missing in action. I couldn't believe it. Why would I even repent and be willing to wash out my dirty rags if God would just let me have fun and try a few more times before I actually conceived the beautiful dark-haired baby? I'm sorry. Irina's trying to get it in. And Verlin and God keep blocking her. This is inappropriate. But I wonder if God loved me at all since he never let me do anything I wanted. This is how it went for me throughout my childbearing years. During many of them, Verlin worked in the States and wrote me between visits home. I was so fertile. I once warned him not to write me anymore because I thought I might just be able to get pregnant through the mail. And that is the end. We're going to stop there. These 2 chapters were very interesting. I went from crying to sitting here laughing. I think that Irene is doing an awesome job of creating the visuals of what happened. Her descriptions are like this, and a lot of you have said it in the comment section as well. Go ahead and do me a favor. Hit the like button. As I said, it helps the channel. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're on the road to 2,000. Until next time.